Well, Paul, I've got 8:33, and I think we'll get started here. And again, tonight's program is all about, you've just gotten your bees, you've put them in the box, and it's a couple days later, and you need to do your first inspection. And so Paul's going to walk us through exactly what that's going to look like and what you're going to look for, and a whole bunch of other little details that only he knows best about. So Paul, with that, and by the way, Paul has taught for me, as you all know, a number of occasions, and he just does a bang up job on that. So Paul, thanks for your time and taking away from your evening, and I know you're busy, but I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, I'm going to switch to gallery view so I see a few more faces besides
it's all yours.
my own. Okay, well, good evening, and I want to share a few things with you today. Let me know if you can't hear me well. I'm going to try to project. I'm in my shop. I got rain outside. I got a new calf right outside the door. I got chickens in the back, so you might hear some odd noises, but that's where I like to be. So. Couple things before you actually get into the hive, we need to think about where and when and what we need to do to be prepared. So first thing, you want to make sure that you're protected, especially if you're a new beekeeper and you don't have a lot of experience. Sorry about that. And you're a little bit nervous. You want to probably have a full suit. Make sure you have gloves that cover up, double layer on your wrists and forearms, and make sure you have all your openings zipped up so that you don't find yourself with company inside the suit. That's just going to make you a lot more relaxed, and in turn, that'll make the bees more relaxed. So that's getting you prepared. As far as what you want to have with you to go to that first inspection, a couple of things. Smoker, good idea. Start practicing lighting that thing and keeping it going, because it takes practice if you're not used to it. Fuel for the smoker, I use a variety of different things. I have egg cartons, use pine cones, cardboard rolled up like that in a tube. Stick that in there and light it. So get something that's gonna burn a lot to keep the fire going, but make a lot of smoke at the same time. You want cool smoke. You don't want it to be really hot smoke. And so what I do, you might find some in here, is I stuff some grass or something in the top of it once I get it to kind of dissipate heat, and it also helps to produce some more smoke, but it cools it down a little bit. So gonna have our smoker and have that ready to go. Maybe straighten it so you can get the lid shut. Not a bad idea to have a bottle of sugar water, spray bottle. Sometimes you can give those frames a little bit of a touch up so that the bees will be inclined to draw on those a little bit more. A bee brush is handy to have to gently move the bees off the frame, so I'll demonstrate that a little bit. The gloves that I was talking about, you don't want just some little gloves that just come up to your wrist. A hive tool. This is my preferred type of hive. It's called the J-hook hive tool, and I'll demonstrate using that. This thing, if you bought a kit, you probably got one of these. It may not have the pry bar here. A frame holder, frame puller. I don't generally use it, but it might just be one more thing for you to fumble around if you're not comfortable with it. So don't feel like you have to have one of those. And now we're ready to go at it. So question is, when do I need to get into that hive? Well, with the package installation, there's a couple of things that can happen. The queen is going to have been introduced, packages that we're getting this weekend. Queens will be introduced on Wednesday and Thursday morning. And then, so they will have been in there a day or two by the time we get to Saturday. They'll have a cap on the cage. The queen can't out, and so you'll over that in the installation during the bee college. You can watch that video if you want that in more detail. You're going to expose that candy plug generally to the colony, and they're going to have eaten their way, try to get eaten in there to queen. So I'll talk about how we're going to do that when we get in there. But so it's possible that they will have become acclimated and accept the queen by a couple of days after you've installed her. And that's why we normally recommend that you uncap the candy plug when you do the install, because by the time they get through it, they've already been with her for a while. And so usually by Monday, if you install them on Saturday, she's probably been released and they're all happy and everything's going well. But if you want to do a manually release, or if you are sure, or if you get into the hive and you find that she's not released, what to do with that. The nuke is going to be a lot simpler, and we'll just kind of interject some things about the nuke as we go through there. When you installed the package, you gave them food, okay? And same with nukes too. Those will be coming. I think we're going to have those here on May 8th. And so you'll be putting feeders on those as well, because this rain that we're getting right now isn't going to be producing a lot of pollen and nectar yet. So we want to make sure that they have what they need. But here's our hive here. We're going to want to approach that hive from the back. But before I get into the hive, I'm going to take that smoker that I've gotten going, and I'm going to puff a couple inside in the entrance here and just let that kind of waft through the hive and start to calm them down. You're going to want to do this on a warm day, middle of the day, light wind, if any. Good luck with that around here, right? But puff a little bit of smoke in the front and then go around behind. So as I come around behind, see I have a couple of feeders on here. You'd only do one of these. You wouldn't do all of them, but I have an entrance feeder down here, and that's going to, let me tip that down just a little bit so you can actually see what I'm pointing at. So that entrance feeder is just a jar in a base. It has some very small holes punched in the lid, just like the very tip of a drywall screw. If you're making those, don't drill them out so it's running out. Sitting in there, and then you can see the level of that sugar water, that 1-to-1 syrup, possibly with some honeybee healthy or something in there as well. But you can see the level of it. You can see how much they're consuming. I've had them consume a quart jar in a day when conditions are just right and they're going crazy, drawing wax. So when I hive from the back, I'm going to lift that cover and I'm going to puff a little bit of smoke in there as well. And if I have 2 boxes on here, now you normally wouldn't have 2 boxes, and as soon as I lift this, you're going to see why I have 2 boxes. But in this top box, I just set this here to show you. This would be a frame feeder that you might put inside of the hive in place of a frame along the edge here. You can see by the shape of that, that's what they end up looking like after a couple of years. So that very nice plastic cover that they provide and that has the ladders in it and all that, it's shot and they're drowning like crazy in there. So what I do is I just stuff some bubble wrap in there and it kind of floats on the water and floats on the sugar water, gives them something to stand on while they're getting a drink. Really reduces the number of dead bees that I end up with in this feeder. So if I'm using that kind of a feeder, that's a little tip. Lift this box off here. You'll see what I have here. I've just put that same jar. I like the wide mouth because they're a little more stable, but I've just put that over the cover, over the center hole in the in the inner cover, and they can feed right off of that. So that's a way that you can feed. I just put that box on to keep the wind from blowing that off, and put the cover on, strapped it down, put a cement block on, whatever. So, so I'm approaching the hive from the back, as I said. Take this feed jar off, set it to the side. Take my hive tool, and I carefully loosen this inner cover. They will probably have already started to propolize that on there. Puff a little bit of smoke in here. They're going to be moving around in there. Peel this off, slowly take it off, and set it to the side. Now, what I'll often do when I'm doing an inspection is I'll take that telescoping cover, that outer cover, set this on the ground here. And I'll set it on the side, on the ground behind me. And that way I have a place to set the thing that I take out of the hive. You don't want to be pulling frames out and swinging them around in the wind and putting them out over the grass, because if the queen happens to be on one of those frames and she gets knocked off, she could get in the way. So have a good place that you can have those things land on as you're doing your inspection. So I'm in here, maybe give them a little puff of smoke, just cool them down a little bit. And then I'm going to work on this hive from the outside edges in. Generally, the queen's going to be somewhere in the center of the hive, and you want to approach her from the side. You don't want to go pulling the frame out that she's on like that and potentially her squish in between two frames. So this is an 8-frame box. I find that most frames in an 8 leave an empty 9th frame in this particular box. I try to start off with the little, and then as they start to draw wax on them, maybe spread them out and equally distribute them. But I always leave the empty space on the edge, because that way I'm going to have the room to remove a frame without digging in there and tearing stuff up. Now, I generally want to approach my hive from the downwind side. I don't want them to smell me. I don't want to use flowery shampoo or soap that morning, so I smell like a flower. I don't want to be doing things to get them over me. So so I come at the hive from down if I can. So I might be off to the side to get the wind blowing on me like this. And I take my hive tool and I just loosen that edge frame. Okay. Now the first time you inspect, this may be 3 days in. I wouldn't get in there sooner than 2 days for sure. And with a nuke, you probably don't need to be in there for close to a week. And I'll talk a little bit about that. So loosen that frame by sliding it out towards the edge, and then either using your frame grip or just picking it up. It takes a while to get used to using your gloves and getting things right there. If you have a frame rest, you can hang a frame on the side of the hive like that, or you can just set them like this, lean them against the hive, try to make it stable so they don't slip and fall. So I'm going to pull that one off, and I just work from one side in. Now work my way in here, look at it, see I don't have anything drawn on these frames. They haven't made any wax on those yet, because they've actually been on these. Keep working my way in, and eventually I'm going to find my way to the middle. Now keep your frame in the same order and the same orientation. When they're blank, it doesn't make a lot of difference, but as soon as you start encountering things like honey stores, nectar stores, pollen stores, and brood, you want to make sure that you haven't disrupted their home. So pull this one out, and this one has a little something on top of it here. It has a queen cage holder, queen cage clip, and you can see this one, they've started to draw some wax there on the bottom. Okay, so that's one that they just got started on. But my queen cage is right here in this clip. Now I'm going to pull that out carefully, and I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to see if she's in there still. I'm going to see candy in that plug, in that hole in the end, and see if she's in there. You might have a worker bee in there and the queen might be out of there. So don't, just because there's a bee in there doesn't mean it's the queen. So if the worker bees are all over that cage, just like they're trying to kill her, don't let her out, okay? She's not ready. If they're just kind of meandering over there and you move your finger across there and move them off of there a little bit and they just kind of wander back on there, then you're happy with her. They just want to take care of her. So, so determine the situation with the cage, whether the queen is still in there, what, you know, whether it's time to release her or not. If she's in there and it's still plugged up, notice how I have this oriented. I have the entrance up so that, because if I have the entrance down, and I think I have pictures of the eclipse out there with the entrance down, we were in a hurry, but like that, stuff could fall down in there and plug the entrance and make it hard for her to get out. I guess it's an exit in that case. But so you have it there, pull that queen cage out of there. Again, you're doing this over the hive. You're not doing it out here in front of the camera. You're doing this over the hive so that if she's on, you can, she'll fall back into the hive. But this opening right here, don't try to dig her out of there or dig through the candy to let her out. There's a little cap here. Open that up, and that's really the latch to pop into the cage open. So let me get some contrast. So it's sitting like that. I just pop this little cap over, and then I can tip the whole end open like that. So there's a huge opening for her to get out. So she's not going to get caught in anything. Okay. So now I've released the queen if she hasn't already been released. If she wasn't in there, then I take the cage out. I take my clip out for the next one. Put it in my box. And now I can start looking at the frames as I go through. I may have encountered something worth looking at on my way in there, but I'll look at that frame, and I like to get the sun at my back shining over my shoulder so that I can see down into those cells. So I look in there, get the sun shining right down in there, and I look, and I'm looking for eggs and larvae. Okay. So if you find eggs in the center of those cells, the bottom, that means there's been a queen there in this couple of days. I kept bees for 2 years before I saw my queens, but it didn't bother me because of the evidence that she was there was in the hive every time I went in there. Okay, I found eggs, I found larvae, found everything's going good. Okay. Pull the next frame out. By the time you get some empty space here, you don't need to take them all the way out. Look at that one, see how things are going. They haven't started to draw on it. Maybe shoot a little bit of sugar water on there. Get them attracted to that frame. Going through here. This is a frame that has a couple of interesting things on it. Right here is a queen cup. This is the beginning of a queen cell that they've started to make on this frame. Okay, nothing to be worried about. It's a sign of a healthy colony. This frame also has some pollen in it. You can see how it's darker comb. That's because there was brood in there at some point. Now, this was probably in the second level of the box, and so the brood cluster worked up into there. So when things start rolling on that, and you'll see this in a nuke installation because they've already been in there, everything's going good, but you'll see maybe capped brood here and open brood here and eggs out near the edge. Okay, kind of like it just kind of grows like a ripple, and then once these emerge, then the queen's going to come back. They're going to clean it up and prepare it again, and the queen's going to lay eggs in there again. So so that's what that looks like after a couple of rounds. This has probably been in the hive for a year. So that's what it looks like. Brood here, pollen stores here. Nectar will be around the edges there, and capped honey will be around the edges of that brood nest. So That way it keeps the resources that they need close by for development of that brood and growth of the colony. So you get through there, look, go ahead and put things back in the same order that they came out. Replenish the food. Then under cover, if I'm using this entrance feeder, put this cover on there like that. My straps, my cement blocks, my big chunks of wood, anything I can to keep the wind from blowing that off. This entrance here, see if I can get a little bit closer here, just to talk about that entrance. These feeders, some people say, and I agree, that they can promote robbing. If there's a lot of bees in the area, you might find that they're robbing this hive to get into the feeder. So what I have here, this is an 8-frame hive. So your typical entrance reducer, you need a saw if you're going to take that $1 entrance reducer for a 10-frame that you got at Murdoch's and make it fit there. But notice that there's different entrance sizes. There's the narrow one and the wider one. When you first start with a package, that small entrance is plenty for them to get in and out. There's not very many of them. And you want to make it sure that they can defend their colony well. So what I have here is a piece of 1x2, fits right in there next to there. So the opening for the bees, the entrance is away from the feeder. So if someone's going to come and rob, they're going to have to fight their way in the door and come all the way over here to get to that feeder. Okay, it's just a little bit about orientation of feeder on the entrance to protect against robbing. So just that's what I recommend there. When you're done with them, make sure you've spaced those frames out however you want them. Like I said, I like to start them tight, and then once they've drawn some wax, I'll widen them out a little bit before they cap them. If you start out with big gaps in there, you'll get 8 frames and 10 rows of wax in there. They'll do a double row in between there. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining that 3/8 inch bee space whenever possible. Obviously, when you have new frames sitting next to new frames, you have more than the 3/8 inches. So you're kind of on the edge there. But just a couple tips there. Just the 1-to-1 sugar water to spray to get them on those frames. Do it before you install, and then do it again when you're inspecting on any new frames that they haven't drawn on. Here's a little item that you might have, and you're free to use it if you want, but it shouldn't be in the hive at this point. This is a queen excluder, and its purpose is to keep the queen in a certain part of the hive. Generally, that would go on top of the second deep box between what we'd call the brood boxes and the honey supers. But if you're going to use this, you need to make sure that you know where that queen is, so you don't trap her on the wrong side of the queen excluder. I did an inspection on a hive a few years ago with a fella, and his queen was up here almost by herself. There were like 3 worker bees up here, and it was a little bit cool, and everybody else was down here, and she was just about going to be dead because she got separated from the brood cluster. Those worker bees, besides keeping the brood warm, they're also keeping that queen warm. So just a warning there. The queen excluder is a nice tool if you're wanting to remove a whole box of honey and not have any brood in it, but it's something you need to be aware of it and use it right. So I didn't I said I was going to show you using the brush, and I didn't. I know I had 3 brushes here, so it shouldn't be too hard to do. So this is a bee brush. It's really lightweight. But when you move the bees off of a frame so you can look a little bit closer, maybe you think you saw the queen there and you want to move them around a little bit. Don't jam your finger in there and smash a bunch of bees trying to get in there. Just take this, and this isn't really a broom, it's a tickler. Okay, so you just kind of tickle them and migrate them off a little bit like that if there's a crowd of them, so that you're not agitating them a bunch. You can do a little bit of sweeping like this, but for the most part, you're going to tickle them. You're not going to move them physically with the bee brush. That would be my recommendation. You can also use this to clean dust off the frames. I don't use a brush a lot, but it is nice to have around when you're trying to get a little closer look at something, whether you're looking at, trying to look at some brood and see, if you got different ages of brood, different sizes, and just kind of learning. A lot of beekeeping is just spending some time staring at frames and seeing what you're seeing and learning what you're looking at. And then you can tell a lot about your colony based on what you're observing there. You're not going to follow a calendar because they're not going to follow a calendar. So you can't say every year on the 4th of July, this is going to be the status of things, because it's going to be, and they may be coming up and they may be going down. Now, hopefully you won't have any concerns, but a couple of things you want to be looking for. If you have some drone brood, and I didn't have a frame with drone brood on it handy to show you, but it's bigger around, usually taller and domed cap on it. But if you have some drone brood already there, more likely to find that in a nuke installation than you would on a package first go. But I just take my Hive tool and pick away at a few of those and look at them. If you see mites, you have a problem, you need to act. If you don't see mites, you might have a problem and you may need to act. But if you see them after just opening up a few drone cells, you need to think about treating right away. So a couple of options for treatment. The Formic Pro is formic acid strips that you lay on the hive. Those are temperature dependent. You have to have the right temperature range, max and minimums for a stretch of time. So you'll want to watch your forecast and see where you are with that. The other option that would be recommended would be oxalic acid vapor. So this is an oxalic acid vaporizer. It's a heated pad, has leads on it, connects to a 12-volt car battery. And oxalic acid is, you'll want to read up on it, but it comes in a crystalline form, and when you heat it on the vaporizer, it'll go directly from a solid to a vapor. Then when it fills up the hive, and it will return back from a vapor to a solid on the hive, on the bees, and crystallize there, and then it's going to be able to act on the mites.
Paul?
Yeah.
Paul? Could you go back and talk about when you want to start that first treatment?
Yeah. The reason that I brought this up on the first inspection is not that you're going to do it on the first inspection, but if you're installing a package, you have a window for treatment that is going to be really good, because if you can get that treatment, that oxalic acid vapor treatment done before they cap any cells, then you're going to have a really good kill rate. Formic acid can penetrate the caps of the brood cells, and so it doesn't make that much difference. But if you can get a good kill on this before there's any capped brood, and I don't remember exactly the number of days that you're going to have, but you can look at a diagram. As I get older, I lose track of my numbers, and so I don't want to say something that's not true. Somebody that's on here can probably tell us exactly how many days after that egg is laid that it's going to be capped. So you have this window of time that if you can treat them you're going to be able to get a good kill. Now, you do have to be concerned about a couple of other things. One is the idea of them not liking this space that you've provided for them and them leaving, called absconding. Doing an oxalic acid vapor too soon on a package can prompt them to take off and run. So I wouldn't recommend probably a new beekeeper to do this on the first go. You're going to again then switch over to the other method of oxalic acid vapor treatment, where you do a cycle, a weekly treatment to get them in phases as they emerge until you've basically gotten a full round of coverage and gotten the mites that are on the phoretic mites on the bees. Because again, oxalic acid vapor does not penetrate the caps of the brood cells.
No.
Okay. I think that's all I had on my mental agenda. So I'm sure there's plenty of room for questions, because that's just how it goes when I go off the top of my head. So what do we have for questions, Catherine, in the chat?
Well, I've got a question for you about Varroa. And so when you do your first inspection, which way do you want us to go? Do you want us to use like the sugar roll, or do you want us to use the alcohol?
There's a couple of ways that are really better than that observation. I was keeping it simple as far as, know if you got a big problem or not. But there are a couple of methods for where you take a certain number of bees, cup of bees, and stick them in a jar. You put them in with powdered sugar, shake a little bit, and then there's also an alcohol wash method, which obviously the bees die. But both of those methods are worth learning about and picking one to try. I personally don't do a lot of testing for mites. I do close visual observations and check for other things, but I don't take the time to do the sugar roll or the alcohol wash. But those are things you should learn about and consider doing. I wouldn't always say that you want to do what I do. Sometimes I'm one of those do what I say, not what I do, because I got too many things going.
So what about doing like an oxalic acid dribble? And I know that Randy Oliver was putting oxalic acid on chop rags, I think, and kind of spacing them in the frames, versus trying to do the oxalic acid vapor. I mean, you really have to handle oxalic acid very carefully, very carefully.
Right. Yeah. So just a second, I'll grab, I think I have a package of it right here. Hasn't even been opened. So oxalic acid, as I mentioned, is a crystalline substance, and you'll use a measuring tool to measure that. Here it is, Florida Laboratories, oxalic acid, 99% purity, keep in a cool, dry place. You can apply this. The FDA picks one method and certify that, and then they say this is the only way you can do it. And so that is what their ruling on oxalic acid treatment was. Vaporization is the only approved method. You can't do it when there's honey supers on the hive. You have to remove honey supers before you do the treatment so that you don't contaminate the honey. There has been recent changes to those rulings and things that you might want to read up on. They say that it's not so critical anymore to remove the honey soup But so other methods of treatment, as Catherine mentioned, you can dissolve it in alcohol or water. There's a method that some people have used, which is to use a insect fogger, propane fueled fogger that, and dissolve the crystals in Everclear. Good use for Everclear. I don't drink, so so you do that, puff that in the hive, or as Catherine mentioned, dissolve it and then take a syringe and then just on the in between the frames in here and up that way. Take some cloth and saturate it with it, lay it on the hive, in the hive. Whatever you do, remember that it's only going to treat the bees that come in contact with it. So it's either got to be all over the place or you're going to miss some. That's why the vaporization method is probably more thorough, because you basically fog that whole space with that vapor. But other methods can certainly help. And there's a variety of different methods. There's animal treatments. There's rhubarb leaves. There's all sorts of different things that people have tried and claim to work. But scientifically and common practice, oxalic acid and formic acid are probably your first go-tos to get started. Relatively easy to get. The oxalic acid is actually wood bleach you can get at the lumber yard. Same product. That's I guess a little spiel on mite treatments. Hopefully you won't have to deal with it, but some years are worse than others, and it's something to be aware of, to be prepared for.
Okay, and then Paul from Isaiah, how concerned should we be with the potential for mites in Southwest Wyoming? And I don't think mites are really a geographic issue. I think they're just a worldwide issue, but do you want to address that?
Yeah, no more or less than anywhere else, I would say. You're pretty much there, wherever there are bees, there are mites. Now, some bees are more resistant, can defend themselves better, do other things to keep the mite content population down. Another thing that you can use is a drone frame. You can get, these frames are generally painted green, not painted green, but molded in green plastic, and they have a larger pattern of imprinted on there of cell size, and so the bees tend to draw based on that imprint, and so they'll draw a whole frame full of those big cells where the queen's going to lay drones. Well, if I can fill this up with drones and then take them out, I'm going to get mites with that, because the drones are in the cell for longer than workers. Mites apparently know this. They're apparently very smart. So they are going to be more highly populous in the drone comb than they are in the worker comb. So if I can remove the drone comb, I'm going to take a majority of the drone comb out. Then I'm going to take the majority of the mites with it. Then I'm going to take that frame and I'm going to freeze it, or I'm going to scratch it. I'm going to feed it to the chickens, whatever, and get those mites out of the hive. If you're using the drone comb method, it's very important that you mark your calendar, because if you leave those in there, you've created a prime situation for the mites to grow in population. If you leave it in there until those drones start emerging, the mites are going to come out with them, and now you've just made your problem worse. So drone comb is a very good passive method. No chemical application required. It's also a really good way to check. I get, Catherine had asked, I do sugar roll or alcohol wash. The drone comb method is sometimes I'll take a whole frame like that out and I'll open up every cell and I'll look for mites. They're pretty easy to see when the larva in the cap cells, when they're white and those mites are reddish brown, it's real easy to see if there was a mite in there. So, open up 20 cells and see, if you got 4 mites in there, you got a pretty high population there. So, that's another method to manage mite control. There's a couple other things. There's a mite guard entrance. Supposedly the bees go in and get a treatment on them every time they go in and out and knock the mites off. And there's the idea that you shake powdered sugar on the frames, on top of the frames every time you're in the hive, and that the bees will then groom each other to get that sugar off, and they'll knock the mites off in the process. But that, I guess, is another issue. This particular hive has a screened bottom board, and it has this piece of corrugated plastic underneath it. So when you do a treatment, you'll want to take this out, clean it off, put it back in the treatment, whatever treatment it is, whether it's a powdered sugar or oxalic acid, formic acid, whatever, and then put that back in. If you have the screened bottom board with the entrance, here's another one right here, screened bottom board with the insert, and the mites will fall down through the screen and land on here, and you'll be able to see them. So you might do a treatment and then see, well, how bad were they? Just a preventative treatment, and see if you think you need to follow up with another treatment or if you had any effect at all. So screen bottom board, and that is a kind of a nice way to get a rough estimate on the intensity of the mite population.
Okay, Paul, thanks for that. Are hive beetles something we need to worry about in our area?
We don't see hive beetles lasting through the winter here usually, but since we do bring a lot of our bee colonies from places that are warmer, we do get, I have seen small hive beetle, but I've never seen them in a case where they were an issue at all for the hive, and by the next year they were gone. But it is something to be aware of and learn about and look for them. It's just pretty harsh here. A lot of things have a hard time living here, including humans. But the small hive beetle and the Africanized bees are a couple things that we really don't have to worry too much about, because they can't make it through the winter well. So guess that's
okay.
my view on it.
That's sort of good news, I guess. So we're going to talk a little bit about feeding. And so the question is, with 1-to-1 sugar, you said we could add Pro Health as well. We just follow the instructions of 4 teaspoons to a gallon, even when adding to the sugar water?
You can follow the directions. I never seem to have a measuring spoon when I'm doing it. So I mix up a few gallons and I put a splash of this in there. So you're probably seeing it on a reverse view because Apple thinks that we want to see what we look like in the mirror instead of in real life or whatever. But that's Pro Health. And I just, add it to that when I'm mixing it up. Just enough to give it some smell maybe. I don't know, it may have some nutritional value in there as well, but it does help your sugar water last and not mold. It preserves it, which is a benefit. Initially when you put that feeder on there, they're going to suck it down pretty fast. But then when you start going slower and slower, you don't want it to get moldy on them before they consume it, and that product will help with that.
Okay, and then so Now we're shifting gears again, Paul, so I'm making you jump around a little bit. Can
All right.
you address adding bees to a weak hive?
Yeah. So if I have a weak hive, and I was just reading a post, the guy said, I installed 2 packages of bees on Saturday, and I went and checked on them today, and almost all the bees are in one hive, and there's almost nothing in the other hive. So I don't know if he accidentally installed both queens in one hive or what he did, but you're going to get the inconsistency in population. Now, you're going to see difference in population in different varieties of bees. So like right now, if you have an overwintered Italian hive and an overwintered Carniolan hive, the Italians have already started laying eggs, and they've got some brood rolling. They've started building that population a little bit already. The Carniolans are like, it's too cold out there. It's snowing still.
Yeah.
I'm not going to lay any eggs. I'm going to wait. So you're going to see, if you look at them right now, you're going to say, oh boy, they looks like they barely made it through the winter. You know, I might need to do something, but I'd wait a little bit before I go adjusting that population. But if you do have a situation where, you know, things are going along and you really do have a weakness, you have a couple of things you can do. In the middle of the day, most of the bees that care about their home and know what's home have gone out to forage. And so if you go into the hive, when you want to do your inspection, a lot of the bees are out, so you're not dealing with the traffic problems. But if I get into that hive and I say, you know, this one's really doing really well, and I'm not sure that other one's gonna make it, I take out this frame here and say it's got a whole bunch of brood in there. Well, what I do is I pull this frame out. Now there are bees on here taking care of this this frame, but if it's conditions for foraging, those are nurse bees. They really don't care a whole lot about where they are and who they're with, except this brood. They're going to take care of this brood. So I can take this frame with the bees on it and swap it into another hive. Things I want to watch for. I don't want to take the queen with me. Okay, that'd be a bad thing. So I make sure that the queen is not on here. In fact, if I can find the queen on another frame and know she's somewhere else rather than here, that would be good to know before I go moving this to another hive. I can also shake the bees off if I'm nervous about that. I can put it in there, and those bees in that other hive, they'll come and cover that brood. The brood is not hive specific. The bees are, but nurse bees are not so much as foraging bees, and the guard bees at the door and so on. The ones that are on the frames of brood are pretty docile and pretty non-specific as far as what hive they're in. They'll take care of that brood for you. Like I said, you can shake it off if you want to, and if I'm going to shake it, I just shake it like that, just over the hive. Don't do that. Probably don't want to do that. But just shake them off and then set it in the hive, and that's going to give them population. I can never keep the number in my head, but there's, I don't know, 3,500 on this frame. So if they were all in some stage of egg or brood, then I'd be adding 3,500, which is a third of a package of bees to that other hive within the next cycle of hatch and emergence. So I can move bees that way. Another way that people do sometimes is they'll take the hives and they'll switch locations so that the forage bees come back to the location, and maybe they won't realize where they are, and they'll fill up that other hive. I'm not so sure that's going to work so well, but we do see drift. If you have a bunch of hives in a row, the ones on the end are going to get higher and higher population because those foraging bees are going to come back and they're going to say, okay, I think I'm home. I'm just going to go in here. And the ones in the middle of that row are not to get quite as many bees back at the end of the day, probably. But you know, if you need to boost the population of a hive, throwing a frame of food in there is the way to do it, not trying to grab a bunch of bees and dump a bunch of bees in there. You want to take the brood so that when they emerge, they are part of that that other hive. So I think I answered the question. I don't know.
Yep, I think that's great. Okay, so from Krista, our nights have still been below freezing, so I've been using straight sugar on newspaper. They've been eating it. Should maybe I switch to liquid feed now that our days are warming up, but still cold 30s at night?
Well, it depends on what type of feeder you're using. If I have a feeder on the outside now, Joe Comperta says he uses feeders like this year round, and he says that that there's enough sugar in the solution to lower the freezing point to 20 degrees or something like that, and so he doesn't have problems with them freezing. If you have the jar inside the hive, like I was showing here, then it can be a lot colder outside. Remember, the center of that cluster, 82 degrees. Well, you know, it's not going to be 82 degrees at the top here, but it's going to be close enough to not freeze. So
Yep.
you should be able to feed sugar water now internally for sure, possibly even on an entrance feeder. I would be switching to liquid sugar pretty soon here.
So Paul, at what temperature is safe to open that hive up? You know, if her nights are still dropping into the freezing.
Right. Think about when bees will fly. Italian bees need it warmer to fly. Strange, because they'll start laying when it's colder. But if I'm looking at two hives next to each other, the Carniolans, they're going to fly when it's probably 40 degrees out. You're going to see them at the entrance. They're going to be, you know, zooming out. The Italians probably closer to 50 degrees. So if you think about if they don't go out in that, why do I want to bring that into their hive? So probably 55, 60 degrees is probably preferred if you're going to be in there prolonged, pulling frames completely out, and so on. The condition you can introduce is chilled brood, where you kill a whole frame of brood, kill those 3,500 bees or whatever they are on that brood because it got too cold, just because you were looking to see how things were going. Probably not very good practice to be digging in your hive too deep when it's that cold out. But as far as opening this up, and that's one thing I like about this feeding method is I don't have to expose the brood to any cold to go in here and fill up this jar of food, take a peek under there and see if they're crawling around, see how things are going. I don't have to expose them to a lot of cold doing that. I can also do things like sliding off the side, and I can just come in the edge and just, you know, look at a frame or two without opening that up and saying, surprise, it's cold in there now. So like I said, 55, 60 degrees is what I shoot for. Try not to have a lot of wind because I really don't like my queens blowing downwind. But just a guideline, really.
Okay. Okay, I'm just checking to see if there's any more questions here. So we're going to jump back to Varroa. One question here.
Okay.
What is the mortality rate for bees with the oxalic acid? Are you seeing any die-off from using oxalic acid with your bees?
I haven't used it a lot, and I haven't done a lot of looking, you know, trying to determine how many bees died in the process. You know, a few of them got burned on the iron here because that thing gets really hot. But I don't think that it's a significant number that you lose in an oxalic acid vapor treatment. Possibly more of a formic acid treatment, Formic Pro, if the temperatures are high or if the concentration is too great. One thing about that, the formic acid, I wouldn't apply it unless I have 2 deep boxes on. If you just have 1 box on and that strip puts off all that vapor and it's concentrated in that small volume, that can be a problem. I also wouldn't have the top entrance covered with a feeder. I'd have this open so it could ventilate a little bit, and so on. You're going to see the oxalic acid vapor. You need to do it at night when all the workers are in, because they're flying around with the bees all day. When you take, you're going to cover that entrance with a towel, and so that they can't escape while you're treating. But when you take that towel off, they're all going to run outside and try to get some fresh air. Well, the oxalic acid itself is not, it's not toxic to bees, but some will process. There's no doubt. I doubt that more die in a vaporization than would die in a dribble. Bees and liquid are not necessarily a good mix, and you know, you could drown them with a dribble. So if you're looking to not kill any bees, then you probably shouldn't use either method, and you probably shouldn't use formic acid either, because I think I have seen significant population hits, and even a queen taken off on us after a formic acid treatment. But as long as you follow the guidelines and the recommendations and read up on things, you shouldn't have any drastic issues with any of these treatments.
Okay, great. And thanks for all that. Of course, David Lewis is on with us also. And his comment was varroa mites are definitely more lethal than the treatments. And very, very true. Very, very true.
Yep.
So any other questions out there? Any other thoughts or concerns? Let's see. Okay. And you may not know this yet, Paul, but the question is, what are the dates for delivering bees or nucs to the Cheyenne area? Do you have a date yet from the shipper?
Not absolutely certain. May 8th is our planned distribution date for nukes. For those of you who are along I-80, you'll be getting an email. We may be able to do some quick stops, Evanston, Rock Springs, Rollins, and way across on Friday evening or middle of the night, or whenever time it is. So I'll be sending out some information. And for all of you, I mean, whether you're on my list or not, if you have any questions, feel free to email me at prairiewindbees@gmail.com. That's prairiewindbees@gmail.com if you want to get on my email list. I don't send out a lot of stuff. I'm more likely to post stuff on Facebook. My website just has the minimum that I need to have out there for that. But email, I try to respond to an email, answer questions that you might have. So
yeah, your dates just always amaze me, because May 8th is also the date for the Laramie County Master Gardeners plant sale out at Archer.
Yeah. So, yeah, and the 9th is Mother's Day, right? So
yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the way things land, both with supply and also when our weather conditions in this part of the country are good for putting new bees in a hive. You know, a lot of places go sooner. You know, even down in Colorado, they've been installing packages for a couple of weeks now. But even some of them are because of the cool spring have moved dates back on bee, and in addition to that, the northern bees that we're offering this year, because they overwinter in the state of Wyoming, they obviously are off to a later start than those whose parents spent the winter pollinating almond. So that's so those are going to be even more delayed just to get those nukes up to population. But it's just the way it goes with where they were and what temperatures they had for mating and other reasons. So, okay.
Okay.
Wade, I just
So
saw
Paul-
your question about city water.
Yeah.
I don't know that it makes a lot of difference. In fact, when you water your bees, a lot of people will tell you all sorts of different things. Put a splash of vinegar with the mother in it, or put a splash of bleach in it, or you know, they'll go for the neighbor's hot tub and swimming pool. So you got to, you know, bait them back to yours or whatever. So as far as water quality, they love a mud puddle. So water quality is not as critical. They have their own filtration system built in, I guess. But if it makes you feel better, I wouldn't buy distilled water, but you could get filtered drinking water or something that he says is better for you than the city water to mix your stuff with. But personally, I wouldn't. I'd be more concerned with putting well water in my radiator due to corrosion than I would using city water to feed my bees. So just a comparison.
Yeah, the city water's got a pH around 8.5, and my well water's got a pH of right at 7. So that's a big difference. Actually,
Yeah.
it's a huge difference. So
Yeah.
Yep.
And you know, you can do some experimentation with the water that you have available and try some different things and see if they go for one more than the other. I mean, this is all about learning and experimenting and seeing what works for you and what you can learn. So that's a good question. I guess you got my opinion, but not really anything scientific.
there you go. There you go. Well, any other questions or thoughts while we're here that we can help you with your beekeeping, help you be a better beekeeper? If you can think of any topics that maybe I should look for presenters on, by all means, put that in chat and I'll try my best. So I'm always open to ideas and ways to go on this. So Paul, I want to thank you for taking time out of your evening and educating us and helping us be better beekeepers, because it certainly is daunting. Oh my gosh.
Thank you, Paul.
You're welcome.
All right. Well, maybe we'll have the next one will be on varroa mite treatment and timing of that, because oh my gosh, those are nasty little bugs. So
Yeah.
I will look for a topic speaker on varroa mites and mite treatment. Okay, so everybody, thank you very much. Thanks for coming, and hope everyone stays warm and dry, and have a good week, and good luck with your bees. So good night, everybody. And again, Paul, thanks.
Thanks again, Catherine.
Yep, Vance.